Welcome to Standard 12A. In this standard, we will explain the causes, major events, and important leaders of World War II. As you can see, just reading that, that's really three important parts of World War II: causes, events, and leaders. So we're going to break those up into three separate recordings, shorter recordings instead of one long recording. The first essential question we'll try to answer in this standard is, what were the causes of World War II? In other words, if you were asked to list a number of reasons why World War II occurred, these would be the reasons why. We're also moving into a period of history that's much more recent. You may have family members or older neighbors or people you know in your families who either were directly involved in World War II or somehow affected by World War II. I'm sitting out here by the baseball field just as one example. Here's a famous baseball player named Bob Feller, who became a major league pitcher at the age of 17. He was already a really good pitcher at the time that World War II broke out. And 2 days after the attack at Pearl Harbor, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy and gave up the next 4 years of his playing days to serve in the Navy. So we see him here as he served the Navy in World War II. It's just one example of millions and millions and millions of examples of people around the world whose lives were put on hold by this huge event in world history. We're attempting in this standard to answer, what was the reason why? Why did this event occur? Okay, so the essential knowledge we want to get from the standard is, what were the economic, the money, the financial reasons behind World War II, and the political, the government causes of World War II. Okay, so we have a couple of these that we want to be familiar with. Okay, the first has to do with aggression, sort of the violent or the conflict-driven policies of three countries in particular, what were known as the Axis powers: Germany, Italy, and Japan. And we see those three countries in this cartoon loading up a cannon, and our cannon says Axis Peace Offensive. Okay, so even peace in this cartoon sarcastically is being done in a very violent, aggressive way with a cannon. Even before World War II broke out, Germany had attacked some of its neighbors. Germany had acted aggressively towards its neighbor Austria, took that over in 1938. It took over a piece of its neighbor Czechoslovakia, known as the Sudetenland, in 1939. It even moved into some border areas along France that the Treaty of Versailles had prohibited it from doing, all before World War II broke out. We see here Italy acted aggressively in Africa towards Ethiopia. In 1935, Italy took over Ethiopia, which, as you may recall from Standard 9, was one of only 2 African countries that had not been taken over by European colonial powers during the 1800s. And Japan acted aggressively towards its neighbors, in particular China, in taking over the northeastern corner of China, an area known as Manchuria, as well as its neighbor Korea. This was in the early 1930s, 1931. So as we see, 1931, Japan and Manchuria, 1935, Italy and Ethiopia, 1938, Germany towards Austria. These are all dates before World War II breaks out in 1939. So the aggression by these countries was one cause leading up to World War II. Okay, another big cause was, going back to World War I, the failure of the Treaty of Versailles. As you recall from Standard 10, the Treaty of Versailles was intended at the time to put an end to all war. And yet, by kind of being bad winners, the Allies in World War I really sowed the seeds for World War II. Most historians today consider the terms of the Treaty of Versailles to be one of the big reasons that led directly to World War II. As we see in this cartoon, we see the European countries with their bags of seed here, basically sowing the seeds of World War II. Okay, and that was kind of an important cause of the war. We see Germany here portrayed in a German cartoon from 1919-1920 time period as a victim of the Treaty of Versailles. Germany about to be executed for its part in World War I. By the 1930s, we can see Germany is no longer the victim with its hands bound behind its back going off to its death. Germany is now resisting fiercely. We even see in this cartoon that the guy is Germany. He's breaking free of the chains. We see he's stomping and standing on the Treaty of Versailles, the snake representing the countries that forced Germany to sign this. And we see in the background the Nazi swastika as the sun kind of leading Germany towards victory and towards revenge for the Treaty of Versailles. So this was an important cause as well. Okay, along with the failure of the Treaty of Versailles, one of the products of the Treaty of Versailles was the League of Nations, that early form of the United Nations whose goal was to prevent war. It was supposed to be a place where the countries of the world could get together and talk out issues without resorting to war. In cartoons of the time, optimistically, we see here the League of Nations serving as a harness, as a muzzle, keeping shut the jaws of the dog of war. In this cartoon, the fierce-looking dog here representing war, and the League of Nations was going to be what kept the dog from biting or attacking people. Unfortunately, the Treaty of Versailles failed. Really two main reasons here, as we see in this cartoon. The United States, even though it was the American President Woodrow Wilson who proposed the League of Nations, the United States didn't want anything to do with this international organization. We see Uncle Sam sitting here on the sideline resting against the keystone, the last piece in the bridge here, not putting it in place. And so the U.S., the lack of U.S. involvement in the League of Nations was a big source of its failure. And then the other big reason was that the League of Nations, despite its good intentions, was a lot of talk but not a lot of action. The League of Nations could do a lot of talking about preventing war, but it didn't have the power to enforce its decisions. In this cartoon here, we see the members of the League of Nations in their top hats and suits pointing at China and Japan fighting in the early 1930s, but the guys in the suits were powerless to go in and stop it. So the League of Nations' weakness was another cause of the war. Okay, appeasement. This is a word we want to know. Appeasement is a policy of giving in to aggressive nations in order to keep the peace. In a school setting, appeasement is what we see oftentimes on the playground or in the cafeteria. Take a look at the scene here where the bully with the backwards baseball cap is yelling and getting in the face of the kid there with his back towards us. The appeasement is taking place by the other kids, the kids who are just watching and not stepping in to do anything to stop the bullying. Again, countries are like people. Some countries are bullies. Appeasement happens when the other countries don't stop in to protect the country being bullied. This, we could say, happened in the case of Japan with its aggression towards China, with Italy with its aggression towards Ethiopia. No countries got involved, no countries stood up for China or Ethiopia, but most specifically it happened in Germany. The European countries did not want to stand up strongly to Hitler. So even as Hitler was taking over these areas surrounding Germany, no country was willing to risk war to stop him. Finally, in 1938, England and the other European countries did sit down Hitler at what was known as the Munich Conference. And that term Munich Conference refers to a meeting where this term appeasement was most strongly seen. Instead of telling Hitler that he had to give back the countries he had taken, the land that he had seized, the European countries, in order to avoid risking a war, allowed Hitler to keep Austria, the pieces of Czechoslovakia, the pieces along the French border that he had taken. They didn't make Hitler give those back. We see in this cartoon the man or we see Europe is the mother on the far left. The nanny here is the English Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain. We see him here on the left of this picture shaking hands with Hitler. And Chamberlain is telling Europe, he'll be quiet in a minute, talking about the baby. And if you look closely, the baby is Hitler. And the bottle is the Munich Agreement. We see the baby Hitler. They're holding added concessions, extras that were given to Hitler in order to keep the peace. These are all examples of appeasement. Okay, and the effect really was by a few years later, we see Hitler kind of thumbing his nose as he walks over the backs, as the cartoon says, of spineless leaders of democracy. In other words, the democratic countries who could have stood up to Hitler, the dictator, but chose not to in an effort to keep the peace, they're literally being walked on by Hitler as Hitler eventually begins marching his way to more and more conquests. Okay, and then our final reason were these tendencies, these ideas towards isolationism and what was known as pacifism. Isolationism is to keep to yourself. Okay, to isolate yourself is to cut yourself off from contact with others, and pacifism is a desire to keep the peace at all costs, even when the only way to keep the cost would be to stand up and even fight. Okay, so isolationism and pacifism were running very strong in Europe and the United States during this time. We see here a button from 1939. A lot of people in public opinion polls in the United States, even 2 years before the U.S. got into the war, were very strongly opposed to the U.S. getting into the war. We see here in this cartoon, this was a Dr. Seuss cartoon actually, we see the United States in the bed on the left and Europe in the bed on the right, and Uncle Sam there, the United States, saying, good thing we have separate beds. Okay, in other words, the United States is going to isolate itself in its bed and let Europe deal with its problems in its bed. Okay, so nobody, in other words, was really willing, able, or ready to stand up against Hitler, Mussolini, and Japan during this time to try and head off war before it starts. And those are the main causes we need to know for Standard 12A.